Every April, there is a gathering of old friends in Virginia. Whenever I can, I go. It started when we were in college in Fredericksburg. Soon it moved off campus to a public park. Everyone who has been knows that the gathering point is Shelter H in Pratt Park. Officially, the gathering began as the Virginia State Frisbee Tournament. It's still one of the largest longing-running Frisbee tournaments, drawing the best players across North America and even some international players. Of course, throwing a Frisbee is not a career skill. So the 160 or so people gathered this year came for a different reason. The gathering at Shelter H has more the feeling of a homecoming picnic. Eating became a regular part of the tournament 40 years ago when some friends put out a picnic blanket and began making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for the players. Today, the friends construct a mobile restaurant complete with pizza oven and, yes, even the kitchen sink. For 3 days in April, you can come home to Shelter H, play Frisbee in the park with your friends, young and old alike, and eat at the picnic tables in Laszlo's Weenie World. This year, we even had custom Frisbees that proclaimed boldly, "Welcome home. We who are about to dine salute you." Yes, there is still a tournament, but mostly there is a homecoming. Commentator Walter Brueggemann, writing about our passage from Ezekiel, says, Ezekiel 37 is about a homecoming. The time is the exile. 600 years before the life of Christ, the nation of Israel has been decimated. The armies of Babylon descended upon Israel and on the stronghold of Jerusalem, leaving destruction in their wake. The nation lies in ruins. The living have been carried off to live as a refugee population on the other side of the Arabian desert. Here, the prophet has a vision of the bones of the dead scattered in a valley. And while the vision may evoke a particular valley where a battle took place, the question is not whether God is going to resurrect the dead in the days of Israel or not. Now, the question is about the power of God to restore the nation of Israel when the land of Israel is nothing but dry bones. Again, the living have been carried off. The stronghold of Jerusalem is in ruins. The question of the prophet is whether the nation will ever be restored. Will there be a homecoming? The answer, the only possible answer, is that God knows. It is really up to God. The gift of life in the midst of death is in the hands of God. The power of the Spirit to overcome war, destruction, pain, and anguish is in the hands of God. The possibility of a homecoming is in the hands of God, whose Spirit can restore a people and a place. The words gave hope to the nation of Israel in exile. And a generation later, they came home to Jerusalem. According to Christian writer Diana Butler Bass, the overarching narrative in the Bible is humanity's search for home. The people of faith start in Ur, they go across the Arabian desert to Palestine. They go down into Egypt. They go back up to Palestine, where they establish a nation, only to find themselves carried back off in the direction of Ur, from whence they came. And through it all, it is the presence of God that makes each place a home. Bass insists that what makes home is the convergence of a place, the presence of God, and people in relationship. Now, we know this intuitively. We start celebrating homecomings when we are young, and we continue to do it through our lives. They may be school homecomings, or church homecomings, or even national homecomings for those whose journeys have taken them far from home. In Gilbert, Arizona, they have a project called Operation Welcome Home. They believe that every military veteran deserves a welcome home. Whenever they learn of someone returning from deployment, they gather the city officials, they proclaim a day in his or her honor, and with the support of the community organizations and businesses, the entire community gathers for a festive occasion in honor of the person who has returned home. The city of Northampton, Massachusetts, has a Welcome Home project as well. Working in conjunction with Catholic Charities, they welcome international refugee families to their community. They work in the community to provide housing, employment, and all of the things necessary to not only feel welcome in a new place, but to make a home. Along the journey of life, home may be a place that feels like home, or the people who gather and we recognize them, or the feeling that comes when the Spirit of God reaches out and touches our lives and tells us we are home. In the book of Acts, we are told that the first disciples were gathered in one place when the Spirit of God descended upon them and touched them at Pentecost. 50 days after Passover, 50 days after the crucifixion of Jesus, they were looking for some sense of safety as they gathered together. They found a measure of refuge in each other, but it was the Spirit of God who touched them and transformed them for God's purpose. It may not have been so much of a homecoming for the early disciples as it was a homemaking on Pentecost. They became the dwelling of God's Spirit. They became the new Israel. They were the dry bones, decimated by the death of Jesus. And now, without direction, in the absence of Jesus, suddenly come to new life by the power of God's Spirit. They were now the home of God, a people in a place in the presence of God. The striking thing is that at precisely that moment, they became the home of the Spirit of God. They were pushed beyond themselves into the world to tell the good news of God's love. Again, it's Bass who says that when the church does things well, it becomes a training ground for extending the experience of home into the world. Our church home should be a place where we learn things like sharing and eating together, praying and accepting each other, forgiveness and charity. When we share these experiences together in our individual homes and in our church home, they can become habits. If kindness becomes a habit at home, it's much easier to practice kindness in the world. Then our church home will exemplify a genuine community where love overcomes the isolation so many people in the world experience today. perhaps that's why eating is such a key element of homemaking and homecoming. A table brings us together in a place. Breaking bread defines our relationship as a family. Done in the presence of God's Spirit, we are transformed into God's own family. A few years ago, I found out that a longtime member of the Virginia Frisbee family was undergoing treatment for leukemia. Nonetheless, he was bound and determined to make the drive all the way from Louisiana to Virginia to see his friends. Dave and his family arrived on Saturday, hung around the shelter. It was not a time for playing. The tournament was well underway. He took time to speak to everyone. He shared meals one more time at Laszlo's Weenie World. When I had a chance to speak to Dave, I wanted to offer a word of encouragement. As so often happens in the course of conversation, it came up that I was a Presbyterian minister, and at that point, Dave took over. He told me that he had only come to faith in recent years. He felt so blessed to have a wonderful wife and daughters. He felt so fortunate to have loving friends like the group that gathers every year at Shelter H. Most of all, he was thankful for the knowledge of the love of God that was supporting him and all those he loved during his time of illness. In that place where we had shared fun and food, I wanted to encourage Dave. In that place where we had been a Frisbee family, I wanted to be, for him, the family of God. But I came away from that conversation as the one who had received kindness and encouragement. Staring his own mortality in the face, Dave was thankful for all that God had given to him. He was thankful for the homecoming. Whenever we gather at the table of the Lord, it is a homecoming. We stand in a place together, renewed in our relationships by the presence of God's Spirit. Empowered by the Spirit, we are able to go into the world proclaiming God's love and demonstrating kindness in a world that so desperately needs it. Whenever we gather at Christ's table, may it be a table of welcome. Welcome home. Amen. Let us respond.